The sun hung low over the military firing range, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. Around her, the sound of rifles cocking and shells hitting the ground filled the heavy air. Men in full combat gear moved with practiced ease, their eyes sharp, their movement sharper. Among them stood a woman, quiet and unassuming, dressed in standard-issue fatigues that had seen better days. She wasn't new to the military, but today was different. Today, she was stepping into a world where doubts were louder than gunfire. The colonel paced near the firing line, his stern face etched with years of command and hardened by countless drills and battles. His eyes flicked over the soldiers, lingering on the woman. He didn't know her well, only that she had been transferred to this unit recently. He barely registered her presence until she spoke. "Sir," she said, her voice calm but steady, "I'd like to participate in the live-fire exercise today." The words hung in the air, simple yet daring. The colonel stopped, turned slowly, and raised an eyebrow. His lips curled into a faint, dismissive smile. "You want to join the drill?" His voice was low, but carried the unmistakable edge of skepticism. "Do you realize who you're up against? These men are the best SEALs in the country. This isn't a training ground for beginners." Around them, a few of the SEALs exchanged amused glances. Some chuckled softly, others shook their heads in disbelief. It was rare for a woman, especially one perceived as simple or inexperienced, to ask for something so bold. The firing range was a place where only the toughest, the most skilled, earned their respect. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step forward, holding her gaze steady. "I've trained for this," she said quietly, yet with undeniable conviction. "I want to prove I belong." The colonel's laughter broke the tension, a deep, mocking sound that echoed across the range. "Prove it," he repeated, shaking his head. "You don't belong out here with the SEALs. This is a man's world." But she didn't back down. Not today. Not ever. A few soldiers started murmuring among themselves. Some were curious, some skeptical. She had always been quiet in the barracks, blending in without drawing attention. But today, something had shifted. There was a fire in her eyes, a quiet determination that demanded to be seen. The colonel studied her for a long moment. Then, with a reluctant nod, he gestured toward the firing line. "Fine. You want to prove yourself? Step up." She approached the line, heart steady but pounding beneath her chest. Her fingers gripped the rifle with practiced familiarity, the weight of the weapon comforting rather than intimidating. Around her, the other soldiers readied themselves, their eyes sharp and calculating. They expected her to falter, to miss, to fail. The first target was set downrange, a few hundred yards away. The colonel watched from the side, his arms crossed, lips tight. The woman raised the rifle, exhaled slowly, and took aim. The world seemed to narrow, only the target and the rifle in her hands. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The rifle cracked through the silence, and the bullet flew true. The target exploded with a perfect bullseye. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the colonel's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise breaking through his hardened exterior. The SEALs looked at one another, disbelief spreading like wildfire. She had done it. Against all odds, she had hit the mark. The colonel cleared his throat and stepped forward, voice low but steady. That was impressive. His eyes met hers, no longer mocking, but calculating. "If you want to compete, you'll face every one of my best shooters." She nodded without hesitation. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to silence the doubt, to rewrite the rules. The firing range fell into a tense silence as the challenge was set. The woman who was once overlooked was now the center of attention, and the real test was only just beginning. The colonel's laughter rang out sharply across the firing range, a sound that cut through the stillness like a whip. "You think you can stand shoulder to shoulder with the best SEALs and outshoot them?" His eyes sparkled with derision as he shook his head. "This isn't a place for beginners, especially not women." The men standing nearby let out low chuckles, some with smirks, others with disbelief. They had all heard the rumors about the woman's quiet confidence, but none believed she was ready for this. She stood her ground, unflinching, her gaze steady despite the sneers aimed her way. The colonel's words were meant to break her spirit, to remind her she was an outsider in this brutal world of elite marksmen. But she knew something they didn't. Years of relentless training, sacrifice, and a fire that no amount of mockery could extinguish. The SEALs began to gather around, folding their arms, sizing her up. One of the younger soldiers leaned toward his comrade and whispered, "She's crazy if she thinks she can keep up." Another nodded, "Let's see how long she lasts." Their doubt was thick in the air, heavy as the heat beating down on the range. The colonel took a slow, deliberate step forward. "If you want to prove anything, it won't be here, standing behind me asking for permission. You'll have to earn it. Today. Right now." He pointed to the firing line where the seasoned SEALs prepared their rifles, steady and sure. She didn't hesitate. Her hands gripped the rifle firmly, the cold metal familiar beneath her fingers. She moved to the firing line, feeling the eyes of every man on her back. The weight of expectation, disbelief, and doubt pressed down, but she welcomed it. This was what she had trained for. The first SEAL stepped up, a veteran known for his unerring aim. His shot cracked through the air, striking the target dead center. Applause broke out quietly among his teammates. The colonel nodded approvingly. "Your turn," he said, his voice sharp but now carrying a hint of curiosity. She raised her rifle, heart steady despite the storm of emotions inside. She breathed deeply, focusing on the target downrange. The world outside the line of sight melted away. No laughter, no doubts, no sneers. Only the target and her shot mattered. The rifle cracked, echoing across the field. The bullet struck with precision, a clean hit almost matching the veterans. A few eyebrows lifted, and whispers stirred among the crowd. "Not bad," one muttered. The colonel's jaw tightened, watching her carefully. The competition began in earnest. One by one, the SEALs took their shots, each one trying to outdo the last. The woman matched them, shot for shot, never faltering. Each round built the tension, the skepticism slowly giving way to something else: respect. The men's faces changed as the challenge wore on. The smirks faded, replaced by quiet concentration, even admiration. The woman's calm determination was a force no one expected. The colonel's gaze flicked between her and the targets, realizing he was witnessing something rare, a warrior who refused to be underestimated. At one point, a seasoned SEAL whispered to another, "She's faster than most rookies we've had." Another nodded, his eyes not leaving her form. "She's something else." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows as the final rounds approached. Sweat glistened on foreheads, muscles tensed, and hearts pounded with every shot fired. The colonel, usually the voice of authority and control, found himself silent, absorbed in the quiet storm unfolding before him. When it was her last shot, the crowd fell completely silent. The moment felt suspended in time. She exhaled slowly, aimed carefully, and fired. The bullet struck the bullseye with surgical accuracy. The silence broke with a low murmur of disbelief, quickly turning into whispers of awe. The colonel finally spoke, voice low and measured. "You've earned your place here." The words were heavy with meaning. Respect earned, not given. The simple request that had been mocked so cruelly had blossomed into undeniable proof. Around the range, the men nodded quietly. The atmosphere shifted. No longer was she just the woman who dared to ask. She was a competitor, a peer, and something more, a symbol of grit and determination that transcended stereotypes. Her victory was not just about marksmanship. It was about breaking down walls built by doubt and tradition. And for the colonel, for the SEALs, and for everyone who had watched, it was a lesson in humility and respect. As she lowered her rifle, a calm smile crossed her face. This was only the beginning. The firing range had fallen into an unusual stillness. The echoes of the last shots lingered in the air as the colonel's unexpected words settled over the group. "You've earned your place here." The sentence, simple yet powerful, shifted something invisible but profound. The woman, whose quiet request had been met with mockery just hours before, now stood on equal footing with some of the military's finest. She didn't smile loudly or boast. Instead, she lowered her rifle with a steady hand and took a breath, knowing the real challenge was only beginning. The men who had once doubted her now looked on with a mixture of curiosity and grudging respect. The colonel's eyes, however, still held a trace of skepticism, a test yet to be fully passed. "Training doesn't stop on the range," he said, voice low and serious. "It's about endurance, discipline, and mental toughness. If you want to keep up, you'll need to prove that too." His words were a warning and a challenge. She nodded silently, feeling the weight of expectations but refusing to be crushed by them. Over the years, she had built herself not just as a marksman, but as a soldier, steady, disciplined, relentless. Her path had never been easy, filled with moments where she had to push harder just to be seen. Today was no different. The SEALs returned to their drills, but the atmosphere had changed. The men who had laughed now watched with respect. Some approached quietly, offering tips or words of encouragement. The woman accepted them without pride or hesitation, knowing that every advantage mattered. Days turned into weeks. Every morning started before dawn with grueling physical training, running, weightlifting, obstacle courses that tested strength and agility. She endured it all, often the last to leave the field. The men noticed. The colonel noticed. But it wasn't just about physical strength. She spent hours practicing marksmanship, fine-tuning her aim under different conditions: wind, rain, low light. Every missed shot was a lesson, every bullseye a small victory. She studied the techniques of the SEALs, learning how they balance speed with precision. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she sat alone near the firing line, reviewing her targets. The cool air whispered around her, and for a moment, memories flooded in, the doubts, the whispered criticisms, the countless times she had been told she wouldn't make it. But those voices were now distant. A voice broke through her thoughts. "You're different," a fellow soldier said quietly, sitting beside her. "Most give up. You don't." She looked up, meeting his eyes. There was no judgment there, only respect. She smiled softly. "I have to be different. For me, for those who come after." The words felt true, even as fatigue settled in her bones. The colonel observed from a distance. His stern exterior softened as he watched her push past limits many wouldn't dare touch. He remembered the day she first asked to shoot. Back then, she was just another face in the ranks, a woman with a simple request. Now, she was proving herself a force to reckon with. One afternoon, the colonel called her aside. "You've outshot many here, but being a leader means more than hitting targets," he said. "It's about inspiring those who doubt, about showing strength even when the world says you don't belong." She met his gaze without hesitation. "I'm ready." That day, the colonel announced a special exercise. It was designed to test more than marksmanship, mental resilience, leadership under pressure, teamwork. The woman knew this was her moment to solidify the respect she'd earned. As the challenge began, she led quietly but confidently. The SEALs followed, some still surprised by how naturally she commanded without arrogance. Every decision was measured, every instruction clear. When the exercise ended, the colonel approached once more. "You're no longer just someone trying to prove herself," he said. "You're part of this team." The words settled deep inside her, a quiet triumph. The path had been long and filled with obstacles, but with every step, she had carved her place, not through loud defiance, but steady, unyielding determination. Her story was no longer just about a simple request at a firing range. It was about breaking barriers, earning respect, and showing what true strength looked like. And the military, often slow to change, had just taken a step forward, because she refused to be underestimated. The morning sun filtered through the sparse clouds, casting a pale light over the firing range. The air was thick with anticipation, a quiet tension that hung heavier than the usual discipline. Today was not just any day. It was the day the woman would take her first official test against the SEALs, not just to prove her marksmanship, but to prove her place among them. The colonel stood nearby, arms crossed, his sharp gaze fixed on her. There was no trace of mockery in his eyes now, only a calculated watchfulness. The others gathered behind the firing line, whispers passing from soldier to soldier. Everyone was waiting to see if her first perfect shot had been a lucky break or the start of something real. She checked her rifle once more, running her fingers over the worn grip. Years of quiet preparation had led to this moment. The muscles in her arms were steady, her breathing even. She didn't need to prove anything to the crowd, only to herself. The target was set far downrange, a standard 300-yard silhouette. The colonel gave the nod, and the range went silent except for the soft rustle of the breeze. She raised the rifle, lined up her sights, and steadied her breath. The world narrowed to the tiny target framed in her scope. Time seemed to slow. Then, with a sharp crack, the bullet flew. It hit the center of the target, splitting the bullseye cleanly. A murmur swept through the crowd, then a stunned silence. The colonel's lips pressed into a thin line. He stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "Not bad," he said, voice low. "But one shot doesn't win wars." The other SEALs started their turns. One after another, seasoned and confident, they fired. Each shot was a reminder of the high standards of their elite training. They hit the targets with precision, their faces unreadable, but she noticed a flicker of surprise when she matched their scores. When her turn came again, she felt a steady calm settle over her. No noise, no distractions, just focus. Her finger gently squeezed the trigger. Again, the bullet struck true. The crowd watched, breath held, as her score matched and sometimes outpaced the best shooters on the range. The colonel's eyes flicked to the scoreboard. His usual stern demeanor softened just enough to betray a grudging respect. Hours passed in this rhythm, shot after shot, tension building with every round. The sun climbed higher, sweat dripping from brows, but she remained composed, unwavering. The SEALs exchanged glances, their earlier skepticism replaced by a cautious admiration. Suddenly, a challenge was called out, a timed shoot. Accuracy and speed would decide who truly had the edge. The woman knew this was the moment where many faltered, when pressure broke the best. The SEALs went first, their shots rapid and precise. They moved with practiced grace, their bodies and weapons in perfect sync. When it was her turn, she felt the familiar weight of expectation. She took a breath, tuned out the pounding heartbeat in her ears, and focused entirely on the target. The first shot hit just shy of the bullseye. The second pierced the center. The third, the fourth, each followed swiftly and cleanly. Her hands moved with a fluid confidence born from years of relentless practice. The crowd grew silent again, watching as she completed the drill faster than many had expected possible. The colonel's face remained unreadable, but when she lowered her weapon, a rare nod of approval came. "You're not just good," he said, voice quieter now. "You're exceptional." The word felt heavy with meaning. It wasn't just praise. It was a recognition of hard work, resilience, and talent that had been overlooked for far too long. The woman's thoughts drifted briefly to the moments when she had doubted herself. The sneers, the isolation, the countless hours of training done alone. But here, surrounded by the men who had once dismissed her, she stood tall, her skills undeniable. As the day wound down, the colonel approached her once more. "You've outshot some of the best today," he said, voice low and serious. "But shooting is only part of what makes a soldier." She nodded, knowing the path ahead was still long and full of challenges. But today was a victory, a proof that courage and determination could carve new paths even in the most hardened places. Around her, the SEALs began to gather, no longer just competitors, but quiet allies. Respect had been earned, not given. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, a new chapter was quietly beginning, one written by a woman who refused to be underestimated. The days following the shooting challenge brought a new rhythm to the firing range. The woman had shifted from being the subject of whispers and sideways glances to a figure of quiet respect. But respect in the military wasn't given lightly, nor was it a destination. It was a journey paved with constant tests. The colonel watched her closely, his expression a mask of professionalism that barely concealed a grudging admiration. He was a man who valued results, not words, and so far she had delivered. But today he had something new in mind, something that would push her beyond marksmanship and into the realm of true leadership. "Gather the team," he ordered, voice firm. "We're running a full tactical exercise. No one is exempt." The announcement rippled through the soldiers, a reminder that skill with a rifle was only one part of being a warrior. The woman felt the familiar thrill of challenge ignite inside her. This was no longer about just proving she could shoot. This was about showing she could lead under pressure, adapt, and inspire those around her. The exercise began with a simulated urban combat scenario, a maze of obstacles, hidden threats, and split-second decisions. The team was divided, and the woman was appointed squad leader. A few of the SEALs exchanged surprised glances. It was rare for someone so new, especially a woman, to earn that kind of trust. But the colonel's decision was final. As squad leader, she was responsible for coordinating movements, assigning roles, and keeping the team focused. The SEALs looked to her for direction, their skepticism replaced by cautious hope. The exercise started with gunfire echoes and shouted commands. The woman moved swiftly, directing her squad through the maze with sharp precision. Her voice was calm but authoritative, cutting through chaos like a beacon. The soldiers followed, adapting quickly, trusting her instincts. At one point, the team encountered a simulated hostage situation. The tension spiked. Seconds counted. The woman made a split-second call, dividing her team to flank the enemy while securing the hostages. It was a risky move, but the only way to succeed. The squad executed the plan flawlessly. The hostages were rescued, and the enemy neutralized. The colonel observed quietly, nodding in approval from the sidelines. Throughout the exercise, she maintained a balance of confidence and humility. She listened to advice from the more experienced SEALs, incorporating their expertise into her strategy. She acknowledged mistakes openly, turning them into lessons for the team. This openness forged a bond. Trust blossomed where doubt had once ruled. As the drill concluded, the team gathered for debriefing. The colonel addressed them, his tone serious. Leadership is not just about orders. It's about earning loyalty through actions, respect through integrity, and strength through humility. He turned to her. "You led well today. Not perfect, but well enough to inspire a team that didn't believe in you yesterday." Her chest swelled with quiet pride, but she remained grounded. She knew the road ahead was long, and this was just one battle won. In the days that followed, the squad's dynamics shifted visibly. The SEALs began to include her in planning sessions, seeking her opinion on tactics. The jokes and doubts faded, replaced by genuine camaraderie. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, one of the veterans approached her quietly. "You've changed the way we work," he said. "We see you now not just as a competitor, but as a teammate." She smiled softly. "I'm here to do my part, to earn it every day." The colonel, watching from a distance, allowed himself a rare moment of approval. He had underestimated her once, but now he saw clearly the strength behind her steady gaze. That night, as the base settled into quiet, the woman looked out over the range. The stars above seemed brighter than ever. She had come far, but there was more to do. More battles to fight, more barriers to break. And with every challenge, she would rise, not just as a soldier, but as a leader who proved that determination and heart could shatter any doubt. Her journey was far from over, but one thing was certain. She was no longer just part of a story. She was becoming its fiercest chapter. The night air was cool and still as the base settled into its usual quiet rhythm, but inside the barracks, a quiet storm was brewing. The woman lay on her cot, eyes open, replaying the day's events in her mind. Leading a squad of SEALs through that brutal exercise had been a test unlike any she'd faced before. It wasn't just about shooting anymore. It was about strategy, quick thinking, and commanding respect in a world built to doubt her. Her thoughts drifted to the colonel's words. Leadership is about earning loyalty, respect, and strength through humility. The truth in that statement weighed on her heavily. She had seen firsthand how fragile trust could be, especially when every member of her team had been skeptical, some even outright hostile. But today, something had shifted. She sat up, running her hands through her hair, and thought about the moments when the team had followed her orders without hesitation. The tight corners, the simulated hostage rescue. Those seconds where hesitation could mean disaster. She had made tough calls and accepted the risk. They had trusted her to lead, and they had succeeded. Outside the barracks, footsteps echoed softly. One of the SEAL veterans approached, stopping just outside her door. "You're awake," he said quietly, almost unsure. She nodded. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." He stepped inside, a rare gesture of camaraderie in a place where personal space was sacred. "You're doing more than proving you belong," he said. "You're changing how we think." She looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. "How so?" "Most of us grew up thinking this was a man's world. We didn't expect to follow someone like you. But you made us listen, made us trust." His voice was steady, but there was an honesty in it that touched her deeply. The conversation lingered between them as the hours passed. It wasn't about competition anymore. It was about respect earned through grit and quiet strength. In that small moment, the walls built by doubt and prejudice began to crumble. The next morning brought another test. The colonel summoned her to his office, a room filled with maps, charts, and memories of battles fought. He motioned for her to sit, folding his hands on the desk. "You've proven your marksmanship and your leadership under fire," he began, his tone serious but less harsh than before. "But there's something more. Command is not just about skill, it's about vision. How you see your team, how you inspire them to push beyond limits." She listened intently, knowing this was the true crucible. "I understand, sir. I want to earn that trust every day." He nodded, his eyes sharp. "Good. Starting next week, you'll take part in the Advanced Leadership Program. It's rigorous, physically and mentally. Only a few are selected." Her heart quickened. The program was known for pushing soldiers to the brink, testing their resolve and character. "I'm ready." The colonel allowed a rare smile. "I'm counting on it." As days bled into nights, the woman pushed herself harder than ever before. Early morning runs turned into late-night strategy sessions. She studied not just tactics, but the psychology of leadership, the art of inspiring loyalty without force. Her teammates noticed the change. The same men who once doubted now sought her advice, drawn to the quiet confidence she radiated. She became a bridge, a symbol of what determination could accomplish in the face of entrenched doubt. During one grueling training exercise deep in the woods, the squad faced a scenario designed to break them. Limited supplies, constant threat, exhaustion pressing in. The woman's leadership was tested as never before. She made split-second decisions, balancing risk and caution, always mindful of her team's morale. When they emerged victorious, battered but unbroken, the colonel was waiting. His eyes held a new respect. "You didn't just lead," he said. "You inspired." That night, As the team gathered around a campfire, stories were shared, laughter echoed, and the bonds forged in sweat and struggle grew stronger. The woman sat quietly, watching the faces around her, no longer strangers, but comrades. Her journey had taken her from doubt to respect, from outsider to leader. But she knew the path ahead was still steep. The military was a world slow to change, built on tradition and tested by fire. Yet, with every step she took, she was rewriting what was possible, not just for herself, but for every woman who dared to follow. And as the stars shimmered above the quiet camp, she felt a fierce resolve burning inside. This was only the beginning. The dawn broke cold and clear, casting long shadows over the training grounds. The woman felt the weight of the day pressing down, heavier than usual. Today was the first day of the Advanced Leadership Program, the final test the colonel had warned her about. It was designed to push soldiers beyond their limits, physically, mentally, emotionally. For her, it was a chance to prove she belonged not just by skill, but by strength of character. The other recruits eyed her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Some were veterans with years of experience. Others were rising stars, hungry for recognition. The unspoken question hung thick in the air. Could she keep up? Could she lead when the pressure was at its fiercest? The program began with an intense obstacle course, engineered to break even the strongest soldiers. Mud, water, towering walls, and narrow tunnels tested every muscle and nerve. She pushed forward, her body aching but her mind sharp. The colonel's words echoed in her mind. Leadership is about inspiring loyalty, respect, and strength through humility. Halfway through, a veteran tried to cut her off, assuming she'd slow the group down. Without hesitation, she locked eyes with him and said, "Step aside." The man paused, surprised by her confidence, then stepped back. She surged ahead, pulling the team along. By midday, the obstacles gave way to classroom sessions where strategy, ethics, and decision-making under stress were dissected. She absorbed every lesson, asking questions that showed not just intelligence, but empathy. The instructors began to take note. But it wasn't just the challenges that tested her. It was the judgment of her peers. Whispers followed her everywhere. Some admired her grit. Others doubted she'd last. She had learned to tune out the noise, focusing instead on each small victory. During a critical exercise, the group was split into teams, each tasked with a complex mission involving hostage rescue and negotiation under duress. The woman was assigned to lead one team. Tensions ran high as simulations intensified, alarms blaring, smoke filling the air, decisions needing to be made in split seconds. Her team hesitated when they reached a dead end in the maze of obstacles. Instead of panicking, she calmly surveyed the situation and devised a new plan, using distraction and stealth rather than brute force. Her squad followed her lead, and they completed the mission faster than the others. Later, during a debrief, the colonel praised her approach. "You didn't just succeed. You thought beyond the obvious. That's what makes a true leader." But the program was relentless. Exhaustion crept in, fingers trembled, minds blurred. One night, as she lay awake, muscles sore and mind racing, doubt whispered again. Was she strong enough? Was she enough? The next day brought the final test, a grueling 24-hour endurance challenge designed to simulate real battlefield conditions. Sleep was scarce. Food was limited. Every decision mattered. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind stayed focused. As the hours dragged on, her team faced setbacks, equipment failures, miscommunications, injuries. Each time, she rallied them, offering encouragement and calm guidance. They pressed on, united by her steady leadership. Near the end, a simulated explosion forced the team to make a quick decision: risk crossing an exposed field to reach safety or hold their ground and risk capture. She weighed the options swiftly and ordered the move across the field, guiding her team with precision and care. The decision saved lives. When the challenge finally ended, exhaustion and relief washed over everyone. The colonel approached her, his face unreadable for a moment. Then, with a nod, he said, "You've earned it. You're ready." The words hit her harder than she expected. She felt a swell of pride, but also a deep sense of responsibility. This was more than an accomplishment. It was a promise, to herself, to those who doubted, and to the future of women in the military. Later, as she stood among her teammates, she saw something new in their eyes: trust, respect, and something she hadn't seen before: genuine camaraderie. They no longer saw her as an outsider or a challenge, but as one of them. That night, beneath the stars, she thought about how far she had come. From the simple request at the firing range to this moment of acceptance and belonging, it had been a journey marked by courage and unyielding determination. She knew the path ahead would continue to test her. The military was a world of tradition and toughness, slow to change, but capable of growth. And she was ready to be part of that change, not as a symbol, but as a leader who earned every ounce of respect. Her story was no longer just about breaking barriers. It was about building bridges, showing that strength, resilience, and leadership have no gender. And as the cool night air settled around her, she felt ready for whatever came next. Because now she was no longer just proving herself. She was leading the way. The final morning of the program dawned with a quiet intensity. The woman stood alongside her team, feeling a surge of emotions: pride, exhaustion, and an unshakable resolve. Today wasn't just the end of the grueling training. It was a declaration: she belonged. Not because she had outshot every SEAL, or because she survived the toughest exercises, but because she had earned her place through grit, humility, and unwavering leadership. The colonel approached, his usual stern expression softened by something almost like approval. "Today's final test is simple," he said, "but unforgiving. It's about trust, cohesion, and how well you've learned to lead and follow." She glanced around at her teammates. These were the men who had once doubted her, the ones who now stood beside her as equals. The mission was to navigate a complex, multi-phase operation that required flawless teamwork, split-second decisions, and unbreakable trust. The whistle blew, and they moved out. The terrain was rugged, dense with obstacles designed to simulate hostile territory. Communication was strained, and every step carried risk. She took point, her senses alert to every sound, every shadow. The team flowed around her, each soldier relying on the other like the finely tuned machine they were becoming. Midway through the mission, they encountered unexpected resistance, an ambush that tested their resolve and training. Bullets tore through the air. Her heart pounded, but her voice was calm and steady, directing her team with precise commands. They responded, covering each other, moving as one. As the firefight died down, one of the men was hit. Without hesitation, she moved to his side, assessing the injury with steady hands. The team quickly set up a perimeter while she applied first aid. Her leadership wasn't just tactical, it was personal. She cared for those she led, and that care forged an unbreakable bond. They pressed on, adrenaline fading, but determination burning brighter. The final phase of the mission demanded infiltration and retrieval of a sensitive package hidden deep within enemy lines. The tension tightened around them like a noose. Moving silently through the darkness, she guided her squad with unwavering focus. Every breath, every step was calculated, every decision vital. When they reached the target, she led the extraction with skill and precision. The mission complete, they made their way back to base, the dawn breaking again, this time carrying a sense of victory, not just in the mission, but in the journey they had shared. At the debriefing, the colonel's praise was clear and unreserved. "You've demonstrated what true leadership looks like. You've earned respect not through words, but through action. You've shown this team and this command that leadership transcends any preconceived notion." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The woman felt a swell of emotion. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the future she was helping to shape for every woman who dared to follow. Her teammates approached her, not with hesitation or doubt, but with genuine camaraderie. One of the SEAL veterans clapped her on the shoulder, saying, "You changed the game. We see you now, and we're behind you." As she stood there, surrounded by the team she had earned, she thought back to that first day, the colonel's mocking tone, the challenge she had accepted. What had once seemed like an impossible hurdle was now a milestone on a much larger journey. Her story was no longer about proving herself to others. It was about leading with integrity, inspiring through strength, and breaking barriers quietly but decisively. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting light on a new day. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight, more ceilings to shatter. But she was ready, not just as a soldier, but as a leader who had earned her place among the best. And with every step forward, she carried the hopes of those who would come after her, knowing that the path she forged was wider and stronger than ever before. Her journey was far from over, but now she was no longer just part of the story. She was its fiercest, most unshakable chapter.